Welcome to the Group Dentistry Now show, the voice of the DSO industry. Kim Larson and Bill Newman talk to industry leaders about their challenges, successes, and the future of group dentistry. Visit groupdentistrynow.com for more DSO analysis, news, and events. Looking for a job or have a job to fill? Visit joindso.com. We hope you enjoy today's show.
I'm Bill Newman. I'm the CEO of Group Dentistry Now. This is our fourth or fifth webinar that we've done in the past couple of months. And Group Dentistry Now, if you haven't been to the website, we have about, right now, sitting around 810 articles, all focused on emerging groups and DSOs. So make sure you stop by, and if you want to watch the recording of this webinar, you can do that. Or if you want to, of course, you're on live, so you wouldn't need to do that. But if you want to read anything featuring any DSOs, including DECA, I know we have a couple articles on you, and Dr. Patel, we're going to have to do some work with you and a bunch on Jarvis already, and we'll make sure you stop by the website. So that's me. I'm going to let Melissa, who is the COO of Jarvis Analytics, introduce herself and then let her talk a little bit about Jarvis and what Jarvis does. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Bill. Thanks for having us today. I started in dentistry 20 years ago as a chairside assistant in private practice. And that experience really allowed me to in depth understand the challenges and the goals of the dentist. And then I started really just peeling back the business side of dentistry. I joined a DSO, which at the time had around 40 locations. That was Dental One Partners in 2004. And I actually stayed there over 15 years. My experience at Dental One Partners ranged from managing one practice to moving into more of a training role for the DFW market. And then after that, I moved into a regional manager role, vice president of operations, and my last almost 3 years were spent as chief operating officer of the West region. So over 60 locations that were non-branded, and very proud and grateful for my time at Dental One Partners and everything I learned there. But in that role, I worked extensively with providers and practice teams to improve results, drive results, and help them meet their goals. And so my role here at Jarvis Analytics, which I joined the team here in January, and we've really been focused on getting this product into more hands of different DSOs, DPOs, and group practices. And what we do, you can think of us as an intelligent layer over your practice management system, where we're pulling and syncing all your data in real time. And we also have some unique workflows. Today, we're talking about KPIs. And so we have many different KPIs that are customized to that individual group. And we're going to dive a little bit further into that today. But what we do is we really allow groups to make intelligent decisions based on their data and supercharge their results. And that's really what, through that work, is how I was introduced to Dr. Alice and to Dr. Parth that you'll hear more about today. And so that's what we do here at Jarvis.
Thanks, Melissa. So next up, we have Dr. Rodney Alice, and he is the Chief of Clinical Operations and a partner at DECA Dental. So again, welcome, Dr. Alice. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background, and then talk a little bit, since you've been at DECA since their inception, a little bit about DECA.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Melissa, for putting this together for us too. Been practicing for 15 years. Been with DECA since inception in November 2008, and now we're at almost 90 offices between Texas and Florida. So, to say 12 years ago I was gonna be here with almost 90 offices, I'd tell you, you could tell me I'm full of crud, but we knew what providers wanted, and we knew what we wanted. So we figured we had the same resolute as other providers, and so as we kept growing, whether it was 7, 10, 12, 15, we were just going to keep growing until, obviously we got uncomfortable. And so, being at almost 90, we feel like we've got a lot of things down. And I think, adding Jarvis over our software in the offices has really, really helped us, go to the next level over the last 18 to 24 months, especially with the clinicians, but even meshing the clinicians and the front office together, because that's the thing that I'm doing on a daily basis: coaching, training, mentoring. Not just the general dentist, but the specialists too. Not necessarily making them better at extracting wisdom teeth or placing implants, but just kind of showing them things in the office that they wouldn't normally have seen, because it's definitely data driven, and that's what Jarvis has helped us be able to show the clinicians, and then the operations team. It goes hand in hand. So 15 years into it, definitely fun with this dashboard and getting this information to our providers, but looking forward to see what we can do over the next 18 to 24 months as well, because this dashboard's only 18 months into it, and we're making small iterations all the time to it. So
thanks, Dr. Alice. So last but certainly not least on the panel, we have Dr. Parth Patel. He is an emerging dental group entrepreneur, and I'll let him tell you what that means. But Dr. Patel, welcome.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Melissa, so much for having us on. Rodney, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. Really look up to DECA, and you guys are doing great things down south. My journey begins as a first-year dental student at Penn. I had always been interested in the intersection between business, healthcare, and entrepreneurship. And as a first-year dental student, I was about 22 years old. I went out, had a fantastic partner, and acquired my first location about an hour north of Philadelphia. 25 operatory practice. And little did I know how big of a mess I was going to turn into. Anything from staff turnover to billing practices that had gone awry, and just not good marketing approaches, etc. I really got in deep early on and realized how much there was to learn about being a practice owner and optimizing your value drivers in your clinic. It became a sink or swim situation. I was spending about 6 hours a day at dental school and 12 hours managing my business. Luckily, I'm sitting here today, so I was able to turn it around, launch de novos, conduct successful acquisitions afterwards, and really continue to follow my passion as being an entrepreneur in healthcare. I was also fortunate enough to go on to the Wharton School, complete my MBA as a member of the healthcare management program over there. And now today, I'm currently focused on driving value and creating healthcare service and technology businesses for like-minded founders, doctors, and talented operators. And so, yeah, happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Dr. Patel. And actually, I think I know which practice you're talking about with the 25 ops, because that's probably about 5 or 10 minutes from our offices here. So, yep. It's funny when you mentioned that. I never thought about that until just now, but I know exactly what you're talking about. So it's great. We have Dr. Patel, who's up here in the Philadelphia area, and actually beyond that. And then we've got Dr. Alice that is down in Tech. Well, DECA is all over as well, right? Dr. Alice, DECA is based in Texas, but where are your other practices?
Yes, so we're based out of DFW. So we've got all 4 major regions, and then South Florida and about to launch Orlando area as well. So Texas and Florida.
No, that's great. And then Melissa was at Dental One, and at that time you were probably how many different states was Dental One in?
Oh, at that time, 14. As you guys know, they've gone through some mergers with other groups and continue to grow. So, I think they're just going to continue to thrive and get stronger and stronger.
Yeah, it's amazing how things are changing so rapidly in the space. And certainly COVID will probably have an impact on some groups. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the webinar. But right now, we are going to jump over here and talk a little bit about KPIs. And what I'd like to say, again, I mentioned it earlier, but I don't know if everybody had joined the webinar, is that we did have quite a few write-in questions. So we're going to focus in high level on certain topics and discussions. But if you have any questions that maybe we aren't addressing, shout them out, or can't shout them out, but in the chat or in the Q&A, you can ask the questions, and we'll try to answer them. If we can't answer them live, again, we'll have your contact information, and we'll be able to follow up. Whether it's myself, Dr. Patel, Dr. Alice, or Melissa, we'll make sure we get back to you. So let's talk a little bit here. General topic is identifying your KPIs. Maybe we start off with, just how did you choose what you were going to measure, how you measure performance, and then maybe we can get a little bit more granular and maybe take a look at how an emerging group like yours, Dr. Patel, what KPIs you look at, and maybe if they're a little bit different than what maybe a DECA might be measuring. And Melissa, you can certainly add in and give us a general overview of what different DSOs are looking at that you work with. So we'll start off with Dr. Alice.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. It's a good question because, where we started at, well, even before Jarvis, where we started at and where we're at now, I'm not saying we look at the business any different. It's just you fine tune your KPIs, because what you think was important, you may get 3 months into it, and then you're like, man, I don't even look at that. So let's keep the KPI for sure. Don't just completely get rid of it, but you've really got to just hone down and pick, whether it's 3, 5, 8, 10, the most important areas of your office. For example, if you're a pedo office, obviously stainless steel crowns and pulpotomies would be the most important. Obviously, if you're endo, it's going to be your endos and your referrals that you're tracking. If you're a general dentist and you refer all the molar endos out, tracking endo, that's ridiculous. So you're going to probably focus more on, whether that's Invisalign, crowns, fillings, whatever it is. You've got to figure out your 3, 5, 8, 10 most important KPI, and then that's just the first step. And then define how you want to track it. Do you want to track it by money? Do you want to track it by patients? There's a million ways to do it. And I've worked closely with Melissa, and she'll probably laugh, but, we've gone back and forth on some of these KPIs. Started with tracking it by dollar amount, whether that's diagnosis or conversion or whatever it is, or then tracking it by patient. So we've gone back and forth, and I feel like we're in a good spot now, but, I say that, and then we may change 2 or 3 next week just to fine tune them a little bit. But I think the biggest thing is just nail down what's important to you and your office and your offices, and then move forward with that. Not being so stubborn that you're going to stick with those forever and ever, but knowing full well, hey, this is just a starting point, and it may be totally different 6 months from now. That doesn't mean your company's totally changed. It doesn't mean you're changing how you look at your company. You just realize, crud, this was really important. I wish I'd have been tracking this 6 months ago. So I think that's the way we looked at it, and it's okay to change.
Dr. Patel?
Yeah, I agree with everything Rodney just mentioned. Oftentimes I like to kind of zoom out and just think for a second, what's the goal of the entrepreneur? What's the goal of the organization? And for me, that's to create value, create financial value, create patient value. And, you want to be able to link value creation to your everyday actions being KPIs. And so if you can imagine a bridge in which you have your everyday action that can hopefully link to an operating metric, which can link to a financial metric, which can then again link to if you're creating value for your firm. And I think that's very important to be able to have an expert understanding on how that bridges. And so when I say creating value, what I'm saying is being able to grow with an economic spread that you can rely with the sustainability of performance. An economic spread meaning you have a return on your invested capital that outweighs your cost of capital or your opportunity cost. Your operating margin being the number one component probably on your return. And then those everyday metrics, those KPIs that really fill into your operating margin, dictate it, and effectively let you know if you are running an organization that is generating value. And, going back to what Rodney mentioned, you really want to simplify it and really have, a handful of metrics that you can bank on. Being in the healthcare services business, there are an infinite number of metrics that you can look at in any given day. So it's important to have an understanding on what's the highest sensitivities for those KPIs you're looking at, and making sure that those have the highest impact on your ROIC. And you can do that in quite a quantitative manner, and that's kind of the framework I employ. But yeah, the simpler the better, and just making sure you can bridge, those daily actions into it if they're aligning and carrying out the firm's greater goals.
That's great, Dr. Patel. Melissa, in general, what are you seeing from the DSOs that Jarvis works with? And maybe we kind of look at this, and Dr. Patel and Dr. Alice, you can certainly feel free to chime in, because you've got the emerging group perspective, and then Dr. Alice, really, you were at DECA from the beginning, so you have that emerging group perspective all the way up to being a large DSO. Are the KPIs a little bit different at different numbers of location? You've got 5 locations versus 90, or you've got 2 versus 400. Do you, as you mature or as you grow larger, do those change?
Yeah, Bill, I can speak to that. I mean, we have clients using Jarvis that have 1 or 2 locations, and then we have clients with over 200 locations that are much more mature in terms of the stage of life that they're at as a DSO. And we do experience a pretty broad range of what each client wants to measure. And that's really where Jarvis shines. We have a library that's been built, and you can think of Jarvis as not just the tool that's going to help you identify what your results are. We have over 80 KPIs in our library right now, and that does not include any of the ones that might be proprietary to a group that they've said, we really want to have this type of KPI and have it be proprietary to our business. But what our clients are able to do is really customize those. And so what I mean by that is you can customize the type of provider or exclude different types of providers from what you're measuring. You can include different transaction codes and even different periods of time so that that metric really becomes yours. But because we're basically a mastermind of all these different DSOs that have been so influential to Jarvis and what we display, there's pretty much anything you can imagine there in the library to choose from and then make it your own. Some of the ones that are consistent, that we see consistently measured in DSOs, of course, first we'll tackle production. Most are dividing up their KPIs between doctor KPIs for general hygiene and then specialty. And within those specialty KPIs, there's all different ways that you might measure things. For example, with ortho, you might be measuring, your close rate, your number of consults, your referrals out. There's a whole host of things that you can measure for each specialty. But we also have just general office KPIs. And we'll touch on that a little bit later, because when we talk about the team approach, there's so many different people that influence your office metrics. And really, I think Dr. Alice alluded to it earlier, the fact that when you have everyone's eyes on these KPIs, it becomes much more powerful because the whole team is really focused on a goal together, and they all have influence over the outcome there. But with those 80 clinical KPIs and even office KPIs, with production, everyone's measuring obviously total production, production per day, per visit, per procedure, by provider. So whereas when I started in dentistry 20 years ago, we were kind of just looking at total net production for the month. Now you can get so granular and really carve out those efficiencies in your practice, which is, I think, especially important as we see cost of PPE going up and all other kinds of variables. Everyone's really focusing more on the individual provider and on the individual transactions that are happening with patients on a procedure level basis. And then when we step out of the production-based metric, obviously you have your clinical KPIs, which our clients are really focusing around their clinical initiatives, whether that's to drive hygiene production. So we can get as granular as measuring your periodoprophy ratios, measuring the types of procedures that are happening when we think about adjunctive related procedures, things like fluoride per day, enhanced oral cancer screenings per day. These are all things that many DSOs want to measure because it's easy to look at a provider's production per day, but to really understand what's driving that, you have to get more into the weeds of what those procedures look like and what case acceptance looks like. And then I would say finally, your collections metrics are really important. So being sure that you have a way to measure the aging of your claims, as well as what's being collected over the counter in real time, is very, very valuable to our clients because they're able to see on a daily basis what those results look like so that they can adjust the behaviors that Dr. Alice was and Dr. Parth was talking about earlier on the spot. And you're not waiting until the end of the month or the end of the quarter to have any unhappy surprises.
Great information. I don't know, Dr. Alice or Dr. Patel, if there's anything more you want to add to that. And I just want to make sure we don't bypass the couple of writing questions that we had there. This is something that's kind of interesting. It's, are there any KPIs out there and that maybe somebody wouldn't typically think of that you're measuring, or Melissa, DSOs that you're working with are measuring, that have been really super important, just maybe something that wasn't top of mind, but has become pretty integral to the group?
Yeah, so I was going to add, just before we get into that question, the one thing Melissa did say, and I did feel like, what the KPIs, again, we've always had them. It's just, it was like she said, it was, instead of being able to be up to the minute or up to the day or whatever, it was like you'd review them maybe mid-month, but you could always get it at the end of the month. But then the end of the month rolls 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 days into the next month. And so, changing habits, we all know this. It's not, you don't just talk to somebody once or talk about something once. It's got to be done 2 or 3 times. So if on the 10th of the month you see something, okay, when you come back on the 20th, you can pull up data that's gone from the 10th to the 20th. Okay, did the behavior change, or did whatever we were looking to move the needle with, is it being moved, right? And so, so that was really a critical thing with the it is up to the minute or up to the 15-minute mark, I think, Melissa, but we look at it more from, like today's Thursday, so I would be looking at it month to date through Wednesday. And I know that's, pretty accurate starting, midnight the day before, but I think the immediate access to that information, you can really change things fairly quickly in the offices rather than waiting, 10 days into the month after to talk to them about something that happened the month before. So that's been a big game changer. And then to answer your question, Bill, there's no silver bullet here. There really isn't. It's if you're talking clinical KPI, the biggest thing that the doctor controls is diagnosis and how you want to track diagnosis. There's a million ways to skin the cat, because again, like I said earlier, it's picking the subject matter of the KPI that you want, but then, Jarvis will give you 50 different definitions, which is good. And then you're like, okay, but hold on, I think I want to track it this way. And again, I'm not saying the way anybody tracks it's right or wrong. It's whatever works for your organization. So for me, there isn't a silver bullet, and I don't think there's one that I figured out over the 15 years. And I'm like, man, we figured this out, and nobody else has. It's just it's an evolving. It is definitely evolving as we go, but there's just no silver bullet on our end. Maybe Dr. Parth has a silver bullet.
No, I wish. I was hoping for you to tell us what it is so we can take it. But yeah, no, I look at a KPI and I look at dental groups, and each group is very different. If you've got to really kind of figure out what the core competency and what the key service offerings of your group are, and then kind of back into, okay, what are the key KPIs and components associated with those core offerings? So for instance, if you're doing a lot of tooth replacement or implants, for instance, Dr. Alice kind of mentioned, diagnosis rates. And then I guess the other component of it, which we'll get to, is, the treatment acceptance component of that, and really figuring out what the expected value, and if, we're driving that. And, if our treatment acceptance is, let's say 50%, what if we toggle it up to, 25% to 75%? What does that look like? What type of value does that create? Okay, how can we do that? How can we diagnose that every day, get real-time feedback, and be there for our teams to make sure everybody's successful and moving the organization forward?
Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Patel. So moving on, next topic, comparison versus competition. So really want to address here, how are you measuring KPIs across all your different locations? How do you use that to mentor, motivate? And then there was a couple really good writing questions that we can talk a little bit about as far as, measuring maybe income challenged neighborhoods compared to higher income neighborhoods. So let's start with Melissa. What are you seeing?
So I think in my experience, these are all really great questions. And one of the amazing things about being in a DSO or a DPO or a group is that all of the sudden you have the ability to compare. So you can compare your providers and your locations, and then you start to see those differences, because just like every DSO is different, we all know that practices are unique in their cultures, within a culture, in the way that their providers diagnose, and in the way that their teams operate. And so being able in one view to all of the sudden have all of your practices or providers in a table in a way that you can kind of rack and stack them and see where your high performers are and where your low performers are, and then start to develop those relationships to share best practices, and even peer and mentor relationships is a really awesome thing. And all of a sudden, you know, you can't go in my experience, come at a provider with just a production number, because then, you know, especially if you're an operator like myself who's not a dentist, the perception becomes, well, this organization is all about the numbers. It's truly all about patient care. And I would say the vast majority of groups out there. And so talking to providers, I think, is really all about their goals and the organization's goals for patient care. And that's really where that ability to compare and even have some friendly competition really drives the level of care that your patients are receiving and your results as an organization. So that's what we're seeing, you know, just high utilization of the features within Jarvis that allow our clients to really compare their practices and their providers together, and then do something with that data that's actionable.
Thanks, Melissa. Dr. Alice.
No, I think Melissa brought up a good point. It's funny, again, just seeing how it's changed during my 15 years, but like, you know, there's something wrong, and I'm just looking at production, but that's really the last thing you're going to talk to them about, because, you know, do more production. You know, what does that really mean, right? And then it comes across poorly to your clinicians for sure, because whether it's 90%, 50%, or 70 or 30%, either way, there's going to be a lot of people that don't take it the right way. So you've got to figure out how to, okay, let's get some clinical KPI, maybe sprinkle some operation stuff in there too, but the clinical KPI, get those nailed down that way. Because if you can improve these, then the production has to go up because of these, whatever, 3, 5, 8, 10 things that you want to track. So that's the way you want to think about it. And that was always the hardest thing. You know, I thoroughly enjoy what I do, you know, coaching, training, and mentoring doctors. This is something I've thoroughly enjoyed, but it's figuring out how to present the data that you know is right, but to also not get them to, you know, to come across the right way to them, to where, you know, it is about guest care. Because if somebody's way down here on whatever KPI you're tracking, they're probably going to be way down there as well in production, but you don't really want to bring up production. But if you bring up whatever it is, whether it's diagnosis or conversion in the office, something like that, to approach it. And I would say the comparison / competition, the culture we have at DECA, I think our doctors are very competitive with each other, but there's a few that, it's not that they don't care. It's just like, well, I don't want to be last, but I don't really care if I'm first. So when you can stack, you know, 120 providers or more than 120 providers against each other, maybe they don't care if they're first, but they sure as heck don't want to be 90, 100, or 120. And so I think that's the thing. And we were talking about emerging versus being in 90 offices. That was something, you know, we just couldn't do when we were at 6, 8, 10 offices. I mean, you can do it, but first and 10th, there is a variance there, obviously, with dollar amounts, but first and 120th, that's a big variation. And that's the stuff that's changed. I wouldn't necessarily say that that much has changed as far as what KPIs we would track from emerging to where we're at now. It's just the leverage or the way it comes across to the providers with that many people doing a certain level in other offices, you know, similar to their size.
Excellent. Dr. Patel?
Yeah, no, piggybacking off of Dr. Alice, I mean, I think the fact of the matter is that typically in a dental office setting, production and patient care are typically aligned. You know, if you're providing your patients with the highest quality care, the best treatment options, et cetera, your production will also typically increase as a result of that, and in a meaningful manner. And so, you know, framing it the right way to providers, every provider is different. I don't think there's two providers that are the same. And so having an understanding of what, clinically your benchmarks are, what your standards of care are, and translating that, communicating that effectively to providers in a way that they can comprehend and typically honestly get motivated by, wanting to be the best doctor they can be, and provide their patients with the best possible care. I think having a dashboard to be able to have an external view on, not just operating in a silo, but being able to benchmark yourself against other providers that you may look up to in a sense is really powerful, and it definitely untaps value in your organization and for your patients alike.
And Bill, I have to mention here, and Dr. Alice, I'll pick on you for a minute. I know you really love the visuals that come along with Jarvis, being able to see your top providers in a certain color. So seeing them in green and maybe seeing that bottom 20% in red. How does that visually impact the business and your providers?
Well, yeah, it's a running joke with the entire C-level team and execs and the RMs, because it's like, show me the colors, because honestly, that was what, you can do all that in Excel, and you can download reports. I think just getting the instant, like, hey, red, bottom 20%, green, top 20%, yellow, you're somewhere in the middle. Doesn't mean yellow's okay, but I think doctors understand, since, again, we've been utilizing you guys for almost 20 months. And when they see red, they know, hey, something's going on here. Let's look at it. Now, to be fair too, somebody has to be last. So sometimes when we're looking at it and it's red, it's like, well, yeah, I'm red, but honestly, that number is actually pretty good. And it really was, just because, the other offices and providers had done it. So it doesn't automatically create a red flag per se, but the red, yellow, and green is a running joke with me and the OMs and RMs and doctors. They know I get a kick out of that. But again, it added the colors because before the reports we were seeing, yeah, you can add the colors in, but it was kind of another step, because you would just get kind of a data spreadsheet, and it just doesn't present as easy to clinicians, because, I'm a clinician at heart. I mean, this stuff wasn't, it didn't come second nature to me. So I know my docs that are seeing patients 5 days a week, they're not looking at these reports. I don't need them to. They're doing what's best for the guest, but that red, yellow, and greens really made it a lot easier for them as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Ellis. So let me ask this question here, because it was one of the writing questions. Major differences and the types of the practices that might be in neighborhoods that may be a little bit different from an income standpoint, and then maybe even just like Medicaid, heavily Medicaid versus maybe more PPO or fee for service or insurance. Any differences on the types of KPIs that you measure, or how you actually look at practice performance, Dr. Patel?
Yeah, I have offices that are in straight 100% fee-for-service settings, and have clinics that are in, settings where there's a heavy managed care component. And there's definitely stark differences. There's no question about it. Coordinating patient financials, coordinating treatment gets a hell of a lot more complicated when you're dealing with managed care and stringent payer rules and contracts, and dealing with the demographic that might be slightly or more low income than a fee-for-service environment. There is a increased need to have qualified financial and treatment coordination at the practice level for these patients to ensure that they get the quality care that they can, whether it's financing mechanisms, in-house payment plans or membership discounts, et cetera. But that, again, tying it back into KPIs, that treatment acceptance is more difficult typically in a low income setting. So making sure you have the right resources in place at the office to optimize that is crucial.
Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Patel. So moving on to the team approach. So this is kind of an interesting topic because it hits on a couple of different things. And I wanted to maybe start with that third bullet point there. And Dr. Alice, you mentioned DECA's culture. So maybe talk a little bit about cultural alignment and KPIs and how do they work together? Do they work together?
No, yeah, thanks. They do. And we've always made culture a focus for us, ever since we started in 2008, because I think it's helped because me, Dr. Ahmed, and Dr. Patel, we're all clinicians at heart. Right now, obviously now with this many offices, this many locations, we're running a business, but we're still clinicians at heart. So we focus, we think as the dentist does, right? And still try to run the company. But as far as the KPIs go, it's making stuff that we feel would have come across well to us. And then if you can get buy-in from the doctor, I think everybody in here, if you can get buy-in from the doctor, the rest of the team will follow suit. Obviously, if you, and that will contribute to great culture in the office. If you have a doctor that isn't happy or doesn't believe in the same thing that you're trying to coach or train or mentor them on, the rest of the team's going to be checked out too, because either they're going to get upset with the doctor or they're going to believe the same thing that the doctor does. So I think that's really key on getting buy-in from the doctor. And then a close second is the office manager, right? And so for them, as far as what I've been, my experience over the 15 years is if you can't just have a good doctor and an average or subpar OM, or vice versa, average or subpar doctor and a great OM. The office is still going to struggle. So doctor first, get buy-in, and then the close second's the OM. And if you can nail those two parts, I promise you're going to look at an office that has great KPI across the board. Maybe not every single month, but most months, and that you're going to have a good team, which in turn is going to create great culture. And that's the thing we joke about too, is if office 200 doesn't feel like office number one, then me, Dr. Ahmed, and Dr. Patel will look at ourselves and be like, well, why are we doing this? Because that's a big thing for us. Even if they're in different states, we just want them to feel the same.
So Dr. Parth, you're shaking your head and smiling. So
yeah, I've always kind of considered it like a Batman and Robin approach, with a doctor and an office coordinator, in converting a patient, making sure, all the patients check boxes are marked off, clinically and financially. And that's really where the magic happens, in my experience at an office, from the time a patient's in the chair, diagnosing, treatment planning, et cetera. And then that handoff to the office manager, where they really understand the treatment as well. They can communicate to the patient and make it happen financially. And that whole, workflow is really crucial. And that's a team approach, in the purest way. If one of those components is off, the whole thing is going to be off. So definitely want to echo Dr. Alice there. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Thanks, Dr. Parth. Melissa?
Yeah, if Batman and Robin are the doctor and the office coordinator, Jarvis is the Batmobile, because
there you go.
I do think, putting the metrics in a place where the entire team can see them, because they're focused around the patient. And I think most groups really do want to keep the focus on the patient and their care and the workplace environment. When performance is front and center like that and everyone can see it, it creates a culture also that's not just centered around patient care, but it's also centered around teamwork and centered around accountability, because the numbers are there, the team is there working towards the goal, and they're out there really in front of everybody. And I've been the regional manager that's responsible to gather up the numbers and take them in the office. And you want your numbers in a place where everybody can see your KPIs before you even arrive. And that's the beauty of it, is that when everyone's looking at the scoreboard, I've compared it before to playing a football game with no scoreboard, and everybody kind of has their own version of what's going on. When you have a scoreboard, you suddenly have a team that's motivated towards a goal. And I think that's very culture driving in any organization.
Excellent. Great points, Melissa.
I just wanted to add one thing on the team approach. So, one thing that really has changed, I don't want to say changed, the opinion of me and Dr. Patel, who we head up the doctors for DECA. Initially when we started this, it was basically he and I that had access, and we would present it to, our board doctors, which, helped train the other doctors, and then slowly gave them access. And then I think over time, the culture, the doctors, we just didn't know what other doctors would do when they saw a long list and they saw their name at the bottom. Would they respond? And so, our doctors now are just chomping at the bit. And I don't know if it's because they're more visible. I don't think they would have done that 18 months ago. And I think, sometimes if, you do a slow burn on some of this stuff, and it can really change your organization, because it's just a time thing, because I don't think it would have been, I don't know about unhealthy, but I don't know how well it would have worked 18 months ago or 20 months ago, just throwing it at all the doctors. Even though it's good data and we felt confident about it, that's something else. I think the team approach over time, it's like everybody's asking for them now. So it's a great feeling.
Yeah, great feedback there, Dr. Ellis. I don't want to sound like the Joker here. I'm going to stay on the Batman and Robin. Thanks, Dr. Patel, for that. But what about, so we talk about office managers, and then we talk about the clinicians and with KPIs. So how do you kind of keep that separation where you don't feel like you have non-clinicians influencing clinicians? I mean, you want to talk a little bit about that, how that works? Because I know that there's some apprehension, maybe from outside the DSO space of that happening, and how you all control that. And maybe I'll let Dr. Patel, since he brought up the Batman Robin, let's go with you.
Sure. One of the things that I really believe in is that when you're measuring metrics or any type of measurement, you want to make sure that you're measuring two things that have inherent tension. And so what I mean by that is, let's say you have a practice and you're giving your team goals to maximize the number of in-house in-house membership plans. And the team is really focused and aligned on conveying these plans to patients and trying to have patients sign up and getting them on this great schedule where they can have discounted fees and a bunch of great things. But you also want to make sure that you're tying that with something that might have some inherent tension, just like a patient experience metric. Because as management, it's really easy to say, hey, let's maximize X, Y, or Z, but you definitely don't want to lose that culture of the practice. You definitely don't want to lose, something inherent in the practice that's really important and that might misalign your team and some of the other goals of the firm. And so I like tying a couple of things together to make sure, there's always a balance that's strike there. And I think that's really important. But yeah, to answer your question, you want to make sure as management, the rewards, the incentives, the systems you're creating align, clinically, they align with your admin staff, and they align with the greater goals of the firm.
Excellent. Okay, let's move on from the team approach and talk a little bit about what everybody's probably talked out about, but unfortunately we still have to address it, is COVID-19. And maybe generally we can speak about this. And why don't we start with you, Melissa, maybe what you've seen from your perspective, the DSOs that you work with, or from a analytics perspective, are there any things that might be looked at differently now than pre-COVID? And then going forward, what would you project?
Well, I'll say, that post-COVID and sort of as we were managing through COVID and still are, I think, especially as we knew that there were going to be closures, what we saw is people really working diligently to understand what they had on the schedule so that they could project what are we losing and where can we recapture this. So taking advantage of being able to have a tool that helps you identify all the broken or lost appointments, and then measure in real time as your team came back to the practice and started rescheduling those. So definitely a heightened awareness around, if something like this happens again, do we have a tool like Jarvis in place that allows us to identify those broken appointments so that we can manage them getting back onto the schedule before the end of the year or before insurance benefits come into play. I would say the other thing is just being able to look forward at what's on your schedule, and also a heavier interest in trends. I think a lot of people rebudgeted or replanned their goals for their practices as COVID was occurring, because they knew they had to pivot for the remainder of the year and establish new goals. I think fortunately the last few months we've seen As most people know, increases in production and some of the best months of the year happened in June and July. And I think everybody's anticipating potential issues in the fall as we get into that dreaded August, September timeframe that most people are worried about. So I would say a focus on being proactive instead of reactive. And now more than ever, you need to know what's happening in your practice, and you need to understand what you're losing and where you can gain it back in a really efficient manner, because you don't know what's going to happen. I don't think any of us ever planned or thought in a million years that this could have happened. And so I think having access to your data and not having to go into each individual system if you have multiple locations is a lifesaver, because decisions were happening very quickly, changes were happening very quickly, and people had to be really nimble to make those decisions.
Great, thanks, Melissa. Dr. Alice.
Yeah, man, I think everybody has COVID out, but no, it's man, that's the most stressful thing I've ever done. Other than when I had my identical twin boys after we opened up 3 offices back in 2009, right back to back, and then the kids came out. But kidding aside, like closing down wasn't that big a deal because it was a state mandate here in Texas and Florida. It just was like everybody's closed, elective only. So you just kind of pick and choose, or emergency only. You pick and choose which offices by hub. Then you open back up, and you're looking at it, and you're like, well, I'm going to have a plan here, but you have no clue if you're going to get phone calls. You have no clue if everybody's scared. You have no clue if they're coming back. Well, we thought they would come back. We just didn't know if they'd come back in December or if they'd come back immediately. And luckily, Texas and Florida have both just taken off. A lot of people just don't care. And so some did, but we made sure we put that anxiety at as little as possible, right? And so the thing coming out of COVID, it was great. It was great seeing that we ramped up quickly. The thing that was really hard is everybody was super stressed out, right? Because the clinicians were wearing more PPE than we've ever worn in our career. And in Texas and Florida, it wasn't chilly outside. It was 95 to 100 degrees. And so everybody's it's just difficult. And then they were doing more with less just because whether people didn't come back because of childcare or they changed careers, people were doing more with less. And so we weren't coaching to the KPIs for a while just because there was no way it would have come across well. It was basically everybody was doing as much as they possibly could. And so coming out of COVID, nothing's really, at this point, we're back to almost normal as far as coaching, training, and mentoring the doctors with the KPIs. But yeah, we all expect something to happen in the fall. Do we think we'll be able to shut down? No, I don't. But again, I don't know if I thought we were going to shut down the first time. So just watching those things as we come out of COVID. But yeah, that was opening back up was the hardest thing I've ever had to do professionally, working very closely with our execs and Dr. Patel and Dr. Ahmed, what we're doing to open these offices back up.
Thanks, Dr. Alice. So I'm going to just say we've got about 8 minutes left. So, and I've got a couple of really good questions that just came in, but I want to, first off, Dr. Patel, do you have anything to add? And then I've got a couple of questions here. One on yesterday's WHO recommendation, which we all probably unfortunately know what that was. Although the ADA did have a rebuttal to that, which was great. And then another question wrapped around October recare appointments, and could that be a concern? But Dr. Patel, do you have anything to add overall about kind of opening back or dealing with COVID? And then got a couple of really good questions here at the end. Sure.
Just simply, it forced everybody. It was a shock to the system. I think it was, an unexpected, jolt or wake up. It's like if you're in the morning and someone throws a glass of cold water on you and you're like, whoa, you're on high alert and you have to kind of figure out what the core components of your business are and kind of rethink your business and kind of build it from the ground up in a sense with your operating models. And that is as Dr. Alice said, that's a pretty high stress situation. And then kind of figuring out how you can ramp back to some level of normalcy, as well as accounting for the risk and the new normal of the PPE and whatnot. And it's an ever evolving process. But for me, it made me gain an even better understanding of the operational metrics, our cost structures, our KPIs, et cetera, because you're really rebuilding from the ground up when you don't have hygiene and things like that. You're breaking your business down into components and just regaining an understanding of what the new dental office will look like. Absolutely.
So just in general, I'm going to throw these questions out and you all can answer them. The WHO did come out with a recommendation yesterday. ADA came back pretty quickly and said that dentistry's essentials should stay open. So that's good. Do you anticipate any fallout from, or have you seen any of that? I know it was just yesterday from the WHO's recommendation. Unfortunately, it's all over the news. And then the other question I see here is October recare appointments could be a concern if all the overdue patients rushed in when practices reopened. Any thoughts on that? And I guess, Melissa, maybe I'll let you start.
I'll let our doctors speak to the WHO recommendation, although my husband did ask me about it this morning, so I know he's concerned. But I love the October recare question, because we all know how cyclical dentistry is and that everybody's on this 3 to 6 month cycle. I would say one good way to combat that is by looking forward, knowing what's on your schedule, patient count wise and production wise, and then thinking about perhaps how to restructure your hygiene staffing. Also thinking about those 4910 patients that are on an every 3 to 4 month cycle. I would say really leverage the heck out of those patients in terms of running some reports, which is something Jarvis allows you to do. Identify those unscheduled 4910 or periodontal maintenance patients. Any patients that never came back for their second, maybe half of their root planing and scalings, and getting some creative ways to fill the schedule, since this question is correct. It could knock off your recare cycle because everybody essentially might be a few months off that original schedule that they had for hygiene.
Thanks, Melissa. How about, all right, Dr. Patel, any feedback on the WHO, not the band?
I don't want to get too political here or talk too much on governmental bodies. What I will say is I found overwhelmingly our patients and our communities are seeking dental care. They're looking for dental care. And I believe we're providing dental care in an incredibly safe and protective manner to all key stakeholders alike. And I also think that dentistry has gotten unfairly treated here a little bit. And I think that there's a lot of organizations and bodies like the WHO that are overlooking, things like periodontal disease, things like cavities, things like, just getting a regular checkup and cleaning that have greater health systematic impacts. And like I said, again, and I'm sure Dr. Ellis agrees with this, I view a dental office as one of the safest places you could go with the measures that we took pre-COVID and certainly now after COVID.
Thanks, Dr. Patel. Dr. Ellis?
Yeah, to piggyback to that, I 100% agree with you. It's I'm glad the ADA, had a quick rebuttal. I think this goes back to, how are we feeling in the offices? I haven't heard anything different than what we were already dealing with, because, there's still the people that are still trying to cancel their appointments, and then you've got to educate them like, hey, we don't know if this is going away. We don't know if it's going to get any better than it is right now, right? And so, yeah, so it's good that the ADA had a rebuttal on that. And then I also think, I think a dental office, look, I think we all agree that it's one of the safest places, because you're not going to have a guy bumping into you grabbing an apple that doesn't have a mask on, like that's going to happen at your grocery store, even though there's a rule or there's guidelines saying you should wear it. Like, they have to be wearing that in the office, or at least, and then once we get started, we're wearing all the garb and we're protected. So yeah, that part. And then the recare, just exactly what Melissa said. You're going to have to leverage your hygiene. Obviously, you've got to be as firm as you can and make sure you've got great verbals with your front office on how you can get those 4910s, how to get those prophies in, how to maximize their insurance benefits for the year, right? As far as maximize what they can get as far as cleanings, X-rays, that kind of thing, and make sure if you can get them in twice this year still. So. It is a tough one, and hopefully our dentistry in general can weather the storm in September and October, because I do think there's going to be a lot of struggles with hygiene in those couple of months.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Alice. Melissa, I'll give you the last word here. We have about probably a minute and a half left, and then we didn't get to every question. We got to most of them though, and certainly had a lot of really good conversation wrapped around the topics that we covered, specifically KPIs and COVID and teams. But if you have any specific questions, email addresses for Dr. Alice, Dr. Patel, and Melissa and myself are available. The recording will be available. This will be in podcast form. It'll be transcribed. You'll be able to digest it again in any way, shape, or form you'd like. So if I forget, I'd like to just thank everybody, all the panelists, for being a part of this. And Melissa, I'll let you have the last minute or so.
Thanks, Bill. No, I just want to echo that and thank everyone for participating, and special thanks to Dr. Alice and Dr. Parth. We've enjoyed their partnership as they've continued to work on their versions of Jarvis and make it part of their everyday and how they're successful with their own teams. So any questions that you have, please feel free to reach out. We're always more than happy to talk about KPIs and other topics that will help you drive your business.
Thanks again, everyone. I'm Bill Newman from the Group Dentistry Now show. And again, thanks to our panelists. This was great information, and appreciate everybody here. It looks like we have quite a few attendees that hung out for the entire hour, so we really appreciate that. Thanks again.
The Group Dentistry Now show has listeners across North and South America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. If you like our show, subscribe today, and please tell your colleagues about us.